Welcome everyone to the presentation of my paper titled Force Sharing Problem During Gate Using Inverse Optimal Control. I will first present the context of the paper and the related work. So, optimality of biological motion is a hypothesis that has been posed in the 20th century, with the first computational models applied to human motion in the 1980s with Flash and Hogan. The main idea is that biological systems have many degrees of freedom, which make them redundant and lend them infinite possibilities when choosing trajectories of motion. So, in some sense, the choice is modeled as an optimization problem. So, for example, in this planar box lifting task, we have a 6 degrees of freedom person, stickman, performing a lifting motion in the plane. And among the infinite possible trajectories he could choose to lift this box, he chooses a particular one, which is the red one. So this is an optimization problem in some sense. And in the 2000s, people have thought that maybe using data from real people, we could identify the criteria with respect to which people choose their motions. So this is like inverse optimization. So when we put these two together, we have optimal trajectories on one side and an optimization problem on the other side. The optimization problem, by optimizing, you can get the optimal trajectory, and the cost function of the optimization problem, by identification from your data, you can find it. So we call going from left to right, we call it direct optimal control. From going from right to left, we call it inverse optimal control. The task we have been studying in this paper has been the force sharing problem during gait, where we try to distribute muscle forces given some joint torques. So when a person walks, he plans his step, he chooses the torques he's going to apply in his joints, and he distributes the muscle forces accordingly in order to achieve these joint torques. So the muscle forces are related to the joint torques via a linear relation, which is described by the geometry of the person's body and ligaments. So we used some open source clinical research data for this study, and we came up with a very simple optimization formulation of the force sharing problem, which has been used in the literature before. So just respecting the relation between forces and torques and respecting some bounds in the muscle forces, you need to optimize some cost function in order to distribute your muscle forces at a particular instant in time. So the idea of inverse optimal control is, once we have the data, we want to find an objective function. So the objective function is most commonly represented as a linear positive combination of feature functions. So the feature functions are denoted here by the symbol phi, while the weights are denoted by symbol omega. And so we are going to use the data to identify the weights that make our model best fit the data. So the types of feature functions we use, just to make it more precise, can be classified into muscle forces, muscle activation norms, muscle stress norms, and some other cost functions that have been used in the literature before. So now we're just supposing that the cost function is a linear combination of the features. So once we have the data set, we can use two different methods from the literature to find these weights. One is, both are often but not always called IKKT and bilevel method. And so their properties are as follows. So the KKT method tries to minimize the KKT condition residual evaluated at your data and gives a least square problem, which is easy to solve but is not statistically consistent in terms of weight estimation, while the bilevel method minimizes mean squared error of your predictions with respect to your data, while it's a hierarchical optimization problem which is difficult to solve but is statistically consistent. So in this paper, we suggest that you should always use the bilevel method, but we use the IKKT method anyway to show that it did not give good results. So I'm going to further present to you the results of the cost function weighted identification with the bilevel method, as well as the muscle force prediction that we obtain. So The weights are generally in both the stance and the swing phase of the gait, which the weights are mostly in the muscle activations, here on the norm 1 and norm 2 in the stance phase, and on norm 3 in the swing phase, and on muscle power in both cases, which indicates that the central nervous system actually uses the state. Both these cost functions take into account the state of the body. So we can say that there is kind of a taking into account of the current state of the body when choosing what kind of forces we're going to use. So there have been 35 muscles taken into account in our study. The statistic of the muscles are given with the blue curve and the gray area, while a particular trial is represented in black, while the prediction for that trial is represented in green. And so you can see for muscles with a large amplitude, the predictions are generally okay and some trends are well predicted, while for muscles with very low amplitudes, the trends are not predicted as well. So we also did joint stiffness prediction, and the general trends are well predicted. You can see more details and commentary in the paper. The numerical errors are given here you can see that column-wise that the bilevel method gives the lowest mean squared error, while you can also see that when you compare it to the KKT method, it actually is much better. And that's all. In the future, we plan to study effects of paralysis on the cost function retrieval and on predictions. And we also will try to use multiple subject data in our study, and we'll do kind of more extensive modeling, possibly with taking into account all the step planning and stuff like this, more complicated dynamics, hopefully. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.